Someone named Josh Gerstein said, at some point the amateur effort to knock on doors of home daycares intersects with robust stand your ground laws. First of all, these weren't home daycares. They were in business parks. They were businesses. Second of all, you can't just blast someone for knocking on your door. Knocking on your door isn't trying to break in, brother man. There's a difference between a knock, knock, knock and a fucking trying to bust down your goddamn door. I know that might be hard to understand for the progressive brain cells, but those are actually different things. Is Minnesota even a stand your ground state? I have no idea. I have no idea. But, the quote retweet said, babe, wake up. A new entry on the It's Not Happening meme just dropped. And it does the typical, it's not happening, it's a right-wing conspiracy. It might be happening. And before it gets to the, it is happening and it's a good thing, they've slotted in the, maybe we can kill the people noticing it. Which kind of made me think of all the times that people will call you a white supremacist or a Nazi or some such, or a fascist. And they're not calling you that because they genuinely think you are one. They're calling you that to mark you as an acceptable target for life ruination up to and including death. And so this seems like a very natural evolution of this meme. He's a journalist, so of course he's retarded. Is he? Yeah. Senior legal affairs reporter at Politico. How in the fuck are you a senior legal affairs reporter saying something as dumb as knocking on the doors of these, they're not even home daycares, mind you, these were businesses. Knocking on doors of daycares would result in people using stand your ground laws. What a fucking retard. No wonder everyone hates fucking journalists when they say dumb shit like this. Holy fuck. Homeland Security investigates. ICE Gov are on the ground in Minneapolis right now conducting a massive investigation on childcare and other rampant fraud. That's cool and all, but I feel like this is going to be inefficient.
No. We just provided the ransom, this is the location, before everybody comes.
Are there any subcontractors or anything you guys deal with? Like what say like other businesses that you partner with that you use for a service of any kind? Maybe.
Can I just say how funny it is that like this guy seems to have an official jacket, but this guy just has like a piece of fabric like stapled to his jacket. I looked kind of goofy.
Transportation or anything like that? No.
We provide, usually parents, they come like this, drop the kids, they go to work, and then we take care of the kids.
Awesome. And who actually oversees the receipt of those documents?
I wish there was more of this. Why do we only have 30 seconds? But someone else brought up a good point here. This guy said, you know what? This is why stuff takes forever. Literally all you need to do is ask who the contracted food service provider is, Cisco, local vendor, then ask for invoicing and proof of service. If there is none, then obviously the kids are not being fed, violation of state and federal law, or there simply aren't any kids. I could have this determined in less than 30 minutes per location based off logistics and operational concept alone. Stop overcomplicating things and get to the arrests already. And I was thinking how it's interesting that, yeah, if you're going to have a daycare, you're going to need to feed the children, which means you're going to either need some kind of a food license if you're going to feed them yourself, or you're going to have a contracted food service provider. So that would be probably the quickest way to figure out any of this shit. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement also actually quote retweeted that dumbass Josh Gerstein person. And I said, you would think a senior legal affairs reporter for Politico would know better than to tweet something inciting violence against federal agents. You would think so. But alas, we're dealing with journalists who fancy themselves much smarter than they actually are. I didn't even notice that Mr. Gerstein got fucking community noted too. Stand your ground laws remove the duty to retreat from a threat when a person is in a place they have a legal right to be. Knocking on the door of a supposedly public business does not constitute a threat, so stand your ground would not be invoked as a defense. Thank you, community note, for echoing exactly what I said. A recent video by conservative YouTuber Nick Shirley. Is he? Is he even? Is this another case of like people calling Tim Pool conservative and then far right commentator? Does it just make him conservative because he's investigating something? Because I think if you're calling someone conservative merely because they're investigating fraud, that would point that de facto non-conservatives support the fraud. And I don't think that's really the wording you want to go on. You don't even know his political position? Yeah, I have no idea what his political positions are. And investigating fraud, I don't think is a left or shouldn't be a left or a right issue. It should just be something journalists want to investigate. Fraud noticer is a title you would proudly wear, right? Tech Guy James, thank you for the 18 months. Wouldn't having a gun at a daycare be a felony just like it is at schools? That Twitter comment is stupid on many levels. I didn't even think about that. That's a good point. If you're running a daycare, those are typically gun-free zones in our strange-ass country.
It was really during COVID that fraudsters set up these fake restaurants or sham business.
You know, just based on fucking appearance alone, I'm gonna believe Nick Shirley over that guy. Let's just be honest.
Businesses and health clinics that would provide things like meals to school children or behavioral health services or housing to people with addiction. And because during COVID you didn't have the same checks and balances, you had social distancing, you couldn't have the site visits, you couldn't have the in-person inspections, well, the fraudsters got away with it all and provided the receipts and collected boatloads of cash from us.
And wanting to remind you that a lot of these COVID things stretched far beyond COVID. The FHA paying for people's mortgages that never should have been given one and weren't paying their mortgages, that didn't stop until September this year. So up until September this year, our taxes were being used to pay for people's mortgages when the FHA was making up payments for people who weren't paying on the mortgages themselves.
Taxpayers. More than 90 people have been charged in the schemes, mostly Somalis, and more than 60 people have been convicted. Now you have this violent...
Yeah, but the convictions and the charges don't matter if the judges keep letting these people free. It doesn't matter how many times you say that if the judges just look at it and throw it the fuck out. We need to get rid of those judges if anything is going to be done.
Video getting traction online. It's from influencer Nick Shirley, and he visited several daycares, Somali-owned daycares in the Twin Cities, and basically accused them of doing the same thing. Running these sham operations where kids didn't show up, but still billed the federal government and collected millions of dollars in Medicaid funds.
Well, first of all, they did. Second of all, if they were running legitimate businesses, they would not have treated him the way that they were treating him. It would have been easy questions to answer if he wanted to enroll his child in a daycare. This is once again like mainstream media trying to discredit people, trying to cut them down before they become like the next Matt Walsh or the next Steven Crowder or the next Owen Benjamin. They need to get rid of people before they get any kind of foothold and people start taking them seriously. It's kind of like when I started getting attacked for having just very normal, rational takes on things and being slandered for things that I never even said. And Asmongold said that they go after someone like Kirsche because they can't do damage to me. To the mainstream media people, Nick Shirley is a literal who, someone that they can try and defame and shut down before he gains any kind of influence.
We visited those sites too, as did state inspectors many times over the last 6 months.
So what you're saying is that the state inspectors are actually in on the fraud, much like Walz and other appointees.
And we found the facts on the ground tell a different story. Those daycares, many of them were written up for safety violations, things like maybe busted equipment or staff training issues, but that's not the same as being fraudulent.
You know, they might not have had anyone there who could care for the children, and the equipment might have been broken, and the children might have been living in filthy conditions, and I didn't even see a child, but like these are clearly different issues.
So it's important to put all of this into context. Granted, fraud is indisputably an issue in Minnesota, and next year it's going to turn up the heat continuously on state officials, including Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who's running for re-election. And there are 14 programs, Medicaid funded programs, that are currently under investigation by state and federal government. But childcare is not one of them.
And it should be.
Again, this is something we're going to keep following well into next year.
And I bet you're not going to have any accurate information on it whatsoever, mainstream media man. Read more here. State officials involved in fraud provide paperwork saying there is no fraud. Great journalism, guys. This is actually silly to me. Like, why would you try to defend this? And I think what's also crazy is whenever we've had someone come out and like whistleblow, and the mainstream media people are the ones putting out the articles about it. They just put out the articles. I mean, we even were reading that fucking Comp Mag article the other day talking about white male journalists who were upset that after years of being an ally, they were also being discriminated against too. And it's like, well, damn, I can't feel bad about you, but they still published that whistleblower article. In this case, instead of listening or trying to further investigate the things that this guy is talking about, he's just like, oh yeah, we definitely did investigate and they're definitely legitimate. And actually, why are we listening to an influencer? That's not even a real job. Who's paying attention to a YouTuber? Like, they're doing more effort trying to discredit this guy because instead of being a mainstream media apparatus, he's an independent guy on YouTube. They're doing more effort to do that than to actually investigate the fraud going on. Andy Nyo saying, to explain away Nick Shirley's viral video, a commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth and Families, Minnesota DHS, announced at a presser that the Quality Learing Center in Minneapolis had already shut down permanently last week. But today, the Somalis brought in many children for the cameras. That's interesting that it was supposedly shut down last week. But then there are people there saying it's still in operation. Minnesota government says Quality Learing Center at Center of Somali Fraud Expose is closed as it's all of a sudden full of kids. The now infamous Quality Learing Center, which was made famous after an expose from independent reporter Nick Shirley, is now reportedly shut down. However, on Monday, it was overrun with children. According to the New York Post, the scene at the daycare center was bustling with children on Monday, a few days after Shirley's expose on alleged fraud taking place in Minnesota within the Somali community. At the time of Shirley's report, there was no children in sight at the facility, which had a now infamous typo in the word learning on its sign. And they post the full 42-minute thing here. Damn, 627K likes. That's crazy. At the same time, the Minnesota Star-Tribune had reported that the center was shut down last week. The flagship newspaper has also come under scrutiny in the wake of the report from Shirley, with many claiming online that the YouTuber has been reporting on what the paper should have been doing all along. Which, yes, if we had actual reporters, we would have information on this previously. And I love when I still read actual journalism from reporters on stream. And I'm like, I don't know how you're still employed somewhere, like fucking Daily Mail or New York Post, when you're actually writing about things literally going on. I would assume that's a fireable offense as a journalist in the current year. Citing the commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth and Families, Tiki Brown, the Minnesota... I'm sorry. What? The Minnesota paper reported on the Quality Learing Center being shut down last week. However, the New York Post spoke to the... See, I've said that I actually like reading the New York Post recently. Like, there's definitely still issues sometimes with them, but a lot of the articles I find from them have a lot more of the information, so I don't have to use, like, 7 different websites to get the full story. So that's nice. The New York Post came in here with the fucking steel chair. The New York Post spoke to the son of the owner of the daycare center on Monday, who claimed that Shirley's visit took place before they opened the day Shirley visited. Ibrahim Ali argued to the Post, "Do you go to a coffee shop at 11 p.m. and say, hey, they're not working?" Despite the reports of the center being shut down, Ali appeared to insist that the center was open for business. Ali also blamed the misspelling of the now infamous sign on a graphic designer. What I understand is the owners dealt with a graphic designer. He did it incorrectly. I guess they didn't think it was a big issue. Ali claimed, as he also said, that he helps out with the facility's paperwork. Brother, when I got my logo done, I was communicating with a Japanese logo artist who obviously, spoke some English, did not speak German at all. So when he gave me the first draft of what my logo would look like, the S was missing. So it was spelled like Kirsche, like church. And I was like, oh, hey, bro, the S is missing. And he was like, oh my God, I'm sorry. And then he fixed it. It's just that easy. If it was an accident with the graphic designer, you could just be like, hey, bro, you forgot a letter. And then they fix it in like half an hour, man. Like, it's not that hard. It's not that difficult. If your graphic designer fucked up, you would politely ask him to redo it. Like, it's not even that big of an issue, which is why I was saying that. I love the designer I worked with for my logo. He's fucking amazing. He did a great job, and he was very, good to communicate with. It's like, yeah, obviously, if I'm speaking with someone whose first language isn't English, there can be a little bit of a road bump sometimes, but it's like, if I like working with them, that bump doesn't matter. I'm gonna fucking work through it, dude. And these people don't know English. Yeah, that's my point. That's my point. This Somali guy saying, oh, well, they worked with a graphic designer and he fucked it up and then the owners thought it wasn't a big deal. It's like, no, your branding fucking matters. Anyone running a business knows that it matters. The point is that they didn't think it would matter because they're not running a business, they're scamming. What's this video?
This area. Don't come to this area.
What?
What's your response to the allegations? Is there fraud going on here?
What is your response to the allegations? Shut the fuck up! Well, that doesn't really look very good for you, sir.
No, it's a video. I just want to know. What's your response? Huh?
Get the out of here.
What's your response to the allegations? Is there fraud going on here? And is there children? That's all.
Don't harass me. Don't harass me over here.
Thank you, New York Post, man. At least he's speaking in broken English instead of the Somali squawking. I just like, I don't know how you see that and you don't just get fucking pissed, man. People knowingly coming here and taking advantage of our tax systems. How do you see this and think I must defend these Somalis? Like, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. A resident who spoke to the Post said that the center is usually a ghost town and that they have never seen children go in the center until today. We've never seen kids go in there until today. That parking lot is empty all the time. And I was under the impression that the place was permanently closed, the resident said. Both of the conflicting reports about the center being open or closed were published on Monday, but the Post had a first-hand reporter at the scene. And that's very interesting. I'm wondering if the, commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families announced at a presser that the Quality Learing Center had already been shut down permanently. I wonder if this is a way for them to try and distance themselves and being like, well, if fraud was found, it wasn't our fault in the government. We shut them down. We're not getting any kickbacks. Don't look into us. You know, it's not operating. That's very, very interesting. Very interesting there, guy. But the governor of Washington posted, I met with Somali American community leaders today to discuss the deep damage inflicted by Donald Trump's harmful rhetoric and reckless deportations. Here in Washington state, we recognize that diversity is a strength. I wonder how many times somebody in a position in government can say we recognize that diversity is a strength, and then the foreigners that came here to defraud our country just go, that place. If we go there, we can get everything we want and no one will do anything about it. These people all read off the same script. I wonder if this is because when we were going down last stream about a lot of the fraud stuff, there was a lady who used that daycare checking website that we found from some really famous guy on Twitter that I've now forgotten the name of, even though he has a very recognizable name. But she was looking through the daycare centers in Washington, and she found that a lot of the daycare centers didn't even have physical addresses, and that they all coincidentally had names of owners that sounded very Somalian. Torba, yeah, Andrew Torba, thank you, Skewky. It was Andrew Torba's website. They don't speak English to understand the diversity talk. They have to know some of the magic phrases, you know? They're in a spell casting contest. This is from Tony Saruga. I don't know who this is. Investor, board member, Intel Ops, CIA, NSA contractor / whistleblower. Why would you have that in your profile? If you're actually like some CIA, NSA contractor, why would you put that in your profile? That seems like dangerous. It says GPS Hassan Mohammed is an 18-year-old Somali man and student at Minnesota State University, located in Mankato, Minnesota. He is part of a large Somali immigrant community in Minnesota, particularly associated with the Cedar Riverside community in Minneapolis, and the town of Owatonna, which he refers to as Owatonna, or the Big O in his video. Minnesota has one of the largest Somali populations in the U.S., with many arriving as refugees in the 1990s and 2000s. However, this community has faced increased scrutiny from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement due to widespread reports of immigration fraud. Officials have estimated that up to half of Somali migrants in the state may have 100% fraudulent paperwork. And he's quote retweeting a video that says a Somali living in Minnesota sends a warning to ICE agents.
I actually heard you guys pull up to Owatonna, the Big O, and you pulled up when I was not there? Yo, so puss ass, boy. You gonna get popped next time I see you ass. Bring the whole cavalry. Yeah, boy, you guys are scared. Scared of the stingray, baby.
It's kind of a weird thing to do. Kind of a weird thing to threaten violence a little bit, you know? Kind of strange, and it's cut off at the top because I have my browser cut off a bit, but it says, "Ice, stop ducking me." You've been watching that vid for 5 seconds, and you've already been spit on 10 times. 2 years ago, Tim Walz signed an abortion bill into law in Minnesota. The new law guarantees abortion access in state law. And the thing about the abortion law that Tim Walz signed is that it includes post-birth abortion, which I thought was something that they were only trying to do in Virginia. So I did not realize that this was something that they were trying to do and actually successfully got through in Minnesota somehow. That seems a little weird to me. Seems a little strange. And then, in current year, this was in February of 2025, the Born Alive bill ignites an emotional debate and advances to the House floor in the Minnesota House of Representatives. Personal and powerful testimony accompanied a bill that supporters say would provide vital protection to vulnerable Minnesotans, and opponents say would disregard the dignity and humanity of families already suffering great loss. The House Health, Finance, and Policy Committee voted 11-10 along party lines Wednesday to send HF 24 to the House floor. The bill would mandate Doctors and Nurses Act to preserve the life and health of infants born alive as the result of an abortion. The bill would return the state to requiring all infants to receive the then life-saving care that they deserve, said Rep. Krista Knudsen, R. Lakeshore, the bill sponsor. State statute says that an infant should be fully recognized as a human person. The bill would change that to a born alive infant as a result of an abortion shall be fully recognized as a human person. The bill would also change the words care for an infant who is born alive to requiring responsible medical personnel preserve the life and health of that born alive infant. I don't exactly know how you have an abortion and the infant comes out alive afterwards. Because if you've ever seen what happens during a medical intervention abortion, it's pretty grisly. So I'm not exactly sure how this scenario even occurs, actually. Testifiers said it's an event that happens 3 to 5 times a year, and the life-saving requirement is not new to Minnesota. Abortion survivors were required to receive medically appropriate care that would save their lives, just like any other baby born at the same gestational age. Minnesota citizens concerned for life wrote in a letter. Sarah Zagorski, a resident of New Orleans testifying remotely, said that that was her story. Her mother, after seeking an abortion, threatened to sue a doctor that was not intending to offer care to Zagorski after she was born alive. Zagorski admires her mother's bravery and urged legislatures to pass the bill to protect people like her. Representative Kristen Bonner, DFL Maple Grove, said bill supporters don't understand the reality of families who would be impacted. She emotionally described a scenario in her family of excitedly planning for their baby until they received a diagnosis that the baby would not survive until term. They chose to deliver the baby to let him know that he would be loved, to look in his eyes, and to hold him before he died. Requiring doctors and nurses to provide life-saving care would rob families of those few moments. What the bill is suggesting is not okay. What the bill is suggesting is cruel, she said. I don't understand how that would be cruel. If the bill is saying it should provide, like, if it's born alive, if they should provide care to the child. Like, obviously, if it's going to die anyways, there's nothing that they can do about it, so I don't see how that scenario would be impacted. They force labor to make it be born premature in the hopes that it will die after birth. What the fuck? Why do they always pick the least likely edge cases to champion this bullshit? So the dehumanization of the most vulnerable continues. Trump was right to call this out when he first heard of it? Yeah, absolutely. They don't consider the child a human. They're saying it's cruel to the parents. It's so weird. So strange. As someone born premature, you feel sick hearing that? Yeah, I don't understand, like, why they would force a premature birth. Like, there's plenty of preemie babies that have lived very fulfilling lives. Premature isn't a death sentence. So I found this on Governor Walz's website, and it's just them talking about how he's signing it into Act in 2023. And then when you click on the HF1, it brings you here to the Office of the Reviser of Statutes. And then, there's not very much text here at all, so I'm not sure I've never used the Minnesota government website to look for texts. I've only used the federal government website, which is much less confusing. But the AP for 2023, Governor Tim Walz enshrined the right to abortion and other reproductive health care into Minnesota statutes today, signing a bill meant to ensure that the state's existing protections remain in place, no matter who sits on future courts. Democratic leaders took advantage of their new control of both houses of the legislature to rush the bill through in the first month of the 2023 legislative session. They credit the backlash against the U.S. Supreme Court decision last summer to reverse Roe v. Wade for their takeover of the state Senate and for keeping their House majority in a year where Republicans expected to make gains. After last year's landmark election across the country, we're at the first state to take legislative action to put these protections into place. Walz said at a signing ceremony flanked by over 100 lawmakers, providers, and other advocates who worked to pass the bill. Abortion rights were already protected under a 1995 Minnesota Supreme Court decision known as Doe v. Gomez, which held that the state constitution protects abortion rights. And a district court judge last summer declared unconstitutional several restrictions that previous legislatures had put into place, including a 24-hour waiting period and a parental notification requirement for minors. That's kind of scary. That's kind of scary that like a minor would be allowed to make this kind of a decision on their own without informing parents. Opponents declared the bill as extreme, saying that it and other fast-track legislation will leave Minnesota with essentially no restrictions on abortion at any stage of pregnancy. The leaders of the Senate and House GOP minorities, Senator Mark Johnson of East Grand Forks and Rep. Lisa DeMuth of Cold Spring, urged Walz in a letter Monday to veto the bill, saying the Democratic majorities rejected dozens of amendments that Republican lawmakers proposed as guardrails, including prohibitions on third trimester abortions, except to save the patient's life. But the White House welcomed Walz's signature on the bill, noting that Minnesota is the first state legislature to codify protections into law this year. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre noted that voters also turned out for ballot initiatives to defend access to abortion in California, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Montana, and Vermont. While congressional Republicans continue their support for extreme policies, including a national abortion ban, the president and vice president are calling on Congress to restore the protections of Roe in federal law. Until then, the Biden-Harris administration will continue its work to protect access to abortion and support state leaders in defending women's reproductive rights. While the new law will have little immediate further impact on access to abortion in Minnesota, the governor, legislative leaders, and sponsors of the bill said it provides a critical new layer of protection in case the composition of the state courts someday changes, as it did on the U.S. Supreme Court before it struck down Roe v. Wade. To Minnesotans, know that your access to reproductive health and your right to make your own healthcare decisions are preserved and protected, Walz said. And because of this law, that won't change with the political winds and the makeup of the Supreme Court. It's kind of crazy to read stuff like this, where they're just like, just in case people get on the court that believe differently from us, we're going to have this stuff ratified for the future. How come the Republicans don't do shit like this to protect people in the future? The House passed the bill 69-65 less than 2 weeks ago, and party discipline held firm during a 15-hour debate in the Senate that ended in a 34-33 vote early Saturday. Fundamentally, the legislation is about who decides, said House Speaker Melissa Hortman of Brooklyn Park. Who should legally be entitled to make reproductive health care decisions for an individual, and it can't be decided by politicians, it can't be decided by judges. Melissa Hortman being the woman who unfortunately was murdered by that crazy guy. Abortion is currently considered illegal at all stages of pregnancy, with various exceptions in 13 states. I was confused for a second. I was like, what? Including neighboring Wisconsin and South Dakota. Bans in several states, including neighboring North Dakota, remain on hold for a moment pending court challenges. Because of restrictions elsewhere, Minnesota has seen a surge in pregnant patients coming to the state for abortions. Minnesota's new law is named the PRO Act, short for Protect Reproductive Actions. It establishes that every individual has a fundamental right to make autonomous decisions about the individual's own reproductive health, including abortion and contraception. There are other bills to protect abortion rights in the legislature's pipeline as well, including one to delete statutory restrictions that the district court declared unconstitutional last summer. It's meant to safeguard against those limits being reinstated if that ruling is overturned on an appeal. Hortman said that she expects the House floor votes to approve them as early as next week. Again, that seems quite wild. Right, because, like, if you're deleting specific restrictions, even if this gets repealed, how are those restrictions not reinstated? I don't know, that seems wild to me. But this is the only bill text that I could find, and it says, A bill for an act relating to health establishing a fundamental right to reproductive health, proposing coding for new law in Minnesota statutes, Chapter 145. Be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Minnesota. Section 1, Reproductive Health Rights, Subdivision 1, short title. The section may be cited as the Protect Reproductive Options Act. Subdivision 2, definition. For purposes of the section, reproductive health care means health care offered, arranged, or furnished for the purpose of preventing pregnancy, terminating a pregnancy, managing pregnancy loss, or improving maternal health and birth outcomes. Reproductive health care includes, but is not limited to, contraception, sterilization, preconception care, maternity care, abortion care, family planning, and fertility services and counseling regarding reproductive health care. Reproductive freedom. Every individual has a fundamental right to make autonomous decisions about the individual's own reproductive health, including the fundamental right to use or refuse reproductive health care. Every individual who becomes pregnant has a fundamental right to continue the pregnancy and give birth or obtain an abortion, and to make autonomous decisions about how to exercise this fundamental right. The right to reproductive freedom is recognized. The Minnesota Constitution establishes the principles of individual liberty, personal privacy, and equality. Such principles ensure the fundamental right to reproductive freedom. Local unit of government limitation. A local unit of government may not regulate an individual's ability to freely exercise the fundamental rights set forth in this section in a manner that is more restrictive than set forth in this section. This section is effective the day following the final enactment. So this is kind of what they were saying in this article, where they don't want any sort of the restrictions put back into place. And Republicans were saying, that like they were trying to put some kind of safety rails on the bill, and that wasn't going through. So this is essentially saying there are no restrictions. Anyone who seeks to get an abortion can get an abortion, which is why it would include post-birth as well as what Virginia was talking about previously. Did I notice that they use person instead of woman in the text? How could they do this? Women have the right to reproductive freedom by not having sex. Imagine. Look, a fox lady. Hello. 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 And that line of logic, the like, by not having sex, is why I was always like, the old pro-choice definition, right? If you got raped, you should not be forced to carry that. And I know a lot of people in chat will still disagree with me, but that is a hill that I will die on. If you get raped, you should never be forced to carry your rapist baby in any sense of the word. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has frozen all child care payments in the state of Minnesota after reports of fraud, ordered an audit of daycare centers, activated the Defend the Spend system, requiring receipts, and launched a fraud reporting hotline. Something is happening!
Hello.
Hello.
I'm HHS Deputy Secretary Jim O'Neill. I'm here with Assistant Secretary Alex Adams. Alex oversees the Administration for Children and Families. Intrepid journalists have made shocking and credible allegations of extensive fraud in Minnesota's child care programs. We believe the state of Minnesota has allowed scammers and fake daycares to siphon millions of taxpayer dollars over the past decade.
My office, ACF, provides Minnesota $185 million in child care funds each year. That money should be helping 19,000 American children, including toddlers and infants. Any dollar stolen.
I agree. He does look exactly like someone who I want handling finances. He's got it on lock, bro.
By fraudsters is stolen from those children. Yesterday, I spoke directly with the director of the Minnesota Childcare Services Office. She could not tell me with confidence whether those allegations of fraud are isolated or whether there's fraud stretching statewide.
Today, we have taken 3 direct actions against the blatant fraud that seems to be rampant in Minnesota. First, I have activated our Defend the Spend system for all ACF child care payments across America. Starting today, we require a justification, receipt, or photo evidence before we make a payment. Second, I have just signed and sent a demand letter to Governor Walz. I required a full 360 review of these centers. This includes attendance records, licenses, complaints, investigations, and inspections.
And third, we've launched a dedicated fraud reporting hotline and email address at childcare.gov. Whether you're a parent, a provider, a member of the public, we want to hear from you. Let me be crystal clear. ACF expects every state to uphold the highest standards of oversight, monitoring, and accountability for federal dollars. Minnesota is no exception.
My one worry about this is they're asking for records of attendance and whatnot. And if these people, right, if people in the community were going in and writing in, like, you know, their child's name and when they dropped them off and when they picked them up and then just left with their child because they're going to get kickbacks for participating in this, right? They're going to get some of the money. So it seems to me that they might have, in some of these cases, solid record keeping that makes the business look legitimate, but then there's no children actually there the whole time. So I'm wondering how that would be caught while using this system.
We're committed to holding bad actors accountable. Regardless of rank or office, anyone who's involved in perpetrating this fraud against the American people should expect to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
I
Produced
agree.
by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
I agree. Hard agree. There needs to be criminal repercussions for this. Needs to be criminal repercussions. I love this gif, man. Why isn't there a federal system in place that can and would track every single cent of taxpayer money? That's a great question. Quality Learing Center has been shut down. Journalism that creates actual change. So I think he's referring to how some officials were saying that it was shut down last week. He says they don't know what to do. Should they stay shut down or continue leering? And this was one of these videos we already watched of this man in the red jacket yelling at the New York Post reporter. Minnesota Department of Children Commissioner Tiki Brown claims the Quality Learing Center closed down last week, which explains why there were no children when Nick Shirley visited. Today, however, Quality Learing Center was packed with kids, so I think this is going to attach the video of the Tiki lady talking.
What's going on here? No, it's a video. I just want to know. What's your response?
What's the problem?
Huh?
Get the out of here.
What's your response to the allegations? Is there fraud going on here, and is there children? That's all.
Don't harass me for the here.
We are aware of a video that's being circulated that has gained local and national attention about childcare centers in Minnesota. While we have questions about some of the methods that were used in the video, we do take the concerns that the video raises about fraud very seriously.
So what she's saying is that she also should be investigated, Miss Minecraft Face.
Each of the facilities mentioned in the video has been visited at least once in the last 6 months as part of our typical licensing process. And in fact, our staff are out in the community today to visit each of these sites again so that we can look into the concerns that were raised in the video. So I won't go into any detail about whether or not any of these have any open investigations. I will share that our team was notified that Quality Learning Center closed just over a week ago. And I believe the details that were given at that time were around space concerns. And that's what was shared. The previous one I mentioned that had been closed some time ago was Mako.
Whoops! I meant one of the other fraudulent centers had already been closed. Not that one. Whoops! What, a little slip of the tongue there. Don't look at that one. Quality Learing Center for kids who can't read good. Wait, was that the whole sign? Wait, was that actually in the video?
No.
No, that's a movie reference? Okay, thank God. I was gonna say, I didn't notice that when I watched Nick Shirley's video, and if it actually said that, I'd fucking lose my mind. Let's see here. And the New York Post has an article on it as well. It says, Mispelled Minnesota Daycare closed last week. State claims on the same day owners told the Post it's up and running. Mispelled Daycares at the center of a viral outrage of the Somali community's multi-billion-dollar fraud scandal shut down last week, the head of the Minnesota Child Services Department claimed Monday. At the same time, the owners of the facility put on a dog and pony show for the Post to demonstrate that it was really a working daycare and not a front. Tiki Brown, commissioner of Minnesota's Department of Children, Youth, and Families, told reporters that her staff found no evidence of fraud at any of the daycares highlighted by YouTuber Nick Shirley. She stated that the Quality Learing Center had closed. Yes, she needs to be investigated. Apparently, the owners of the site, which has gotten up to $4 million in taxpayer funds and racked up dozens of inspection violations, didn't get the memo. At least 20 kids were seen entering the Quality Learing Center Monday afternoon after being bussed in. One employee shouted down the Post attempt to ask questions. "Don't fucking come to this area, get the fuck out of here," he said. The daycare says it's open Monday through Thursday from 2 to 10 p.m. and the owner's son, Ibrahim Ali, showed up Monday to claim all the allegations were a big misunderstanding. "Do you go to a coffee shop at 11 p.m. and say, hey, they're not working?" Ali argued to the Post. Hey, remember how another one of the fraud schemes were all of those like cars sitting there not having moved? How they were talking about like medical transport or some shit? Remember that? I wonder how they bust the kids in. A local resident said the activity at the Quality Learning Center was highly unusual. They added the N. "We've never seen kids go in there until today. The parking lot is empty all the time, and I was under the impression that place is permanently closed." After Brown's comments, the Minnesota Child Services Department later sent around a correction noting the Quality Learing Center had initially notified state regulators it was closing, but ultimately decided to stay open. Oh, fuck, dude. It's so fucking sloppy. It wouldn't be the first time that a daycare connected to the Somali community conjured up kids for the cameras. A shocking video unearthed in a 2018 state fraud case showed Somali parents in Minnesota dropping children off at a daycare, checking them in, and then leaving with them moments later. Hey, I was talking about that. Investigators said the ruse was so that providers could bill the state for full days of care for children who didn't actually attend. And the daycare center's infamously misspelled sign was fixed on December 30th. That's fucking funny. The alleged phony daycare centers also gave kickbacks to parents involved. Another video obtained by Fox 9 shows a man handing an envelope to a parent with an alleged kickback payment for participating in the scheme. Minneapolis's childcare facilities have come under scrutiny amid an unfurling scandal involving the North Star State's taxpayer-funded social services, including daycares, in which operators have allegedly lied about stealing millions of dollars in government funds to needy people. Money that was never delivered. Dozens of people, the vast majority Somali immigrants, have been arrested in the fraud scheme, of which $1 billion has been found to be misappropriated so far, including $300 million tied to bogus food handouts, $220 million involving fake autism programs, and $302 million tied to housing subsidies that never reached their intended recipients. Brown did not respond to a message from the Post seeking comment Tuesday. Shocking unearthed video from a 2018 state fraud case shows Minnesota parents dropping off their children at a daycare center and then leaving with the kids moments later. In the surveillance footage dated 2015 and obtained by Fox 9, parents are seen signing their kids into the facility so providers could bill the state for full days of care for children who didn't actually attend. On some days, no families would even show up at all, but the daycares would still claim reimbursements from the government, the outlet reported at the time.
Order for the scheme to work, the daycare centers need to sign up low-income families that qualify for child care assistance funding. These surveillance videos are from a case prosecuted by Hennepin County. They show parents checking their kids into a center only to leave with them a few minutes later. Sometimes no children would show up. But either way, the center would bill the state for a full day of child care. This video from that same case shows a man handing out envelopes of what are believed to be kickback payments to parents who are in on the fraud.
Where was the money going?
I don't know exactly where it went, but
it went to enriching the lives of those fraudsters, obviously. Obviously, man. Another video obtained by Fox 9 shows a man handing an envelope to a parent with an alleged kickback payment for participating in the scheme. The clips, which were recorded in 2015 but only came to light in 2018, resurfaced amid outrage sparked by a viral video from independent journalist Nick Shirley that showed multiple child care centers in Minnesota had received millions in state funding despite appearing inactive. U.S. Education Secretary Linda McMahon called the alleged fraud a breathtaking failure. Minnesota authorities began cracking down on the schemes in 2014, and by 2018, authorities were looking into dozens of businesses suspected of bilking millions of dollars in government funds for the bogus child care services. Additionally, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has come under fire for other alleged scams involving Medicaid-funded disability schemes, including a housing program that helps seniors and disabled people find and move into housing. The scams have been largely tied to Minnesota's migrant Somali community. There's another still frame. Kash Patel has said the agency has deployed personnel and investigative resources to Minnesota as a part of an ongoing effort to dismantle large-scale fraud schemes exploiting federal programs. Patel said the childcare allegations were just the tip of a very large iceberg, and he threatened convicted Somali scammers with deportations. Don't threaten them, just fucking do it! They should be deported! What do you mean? What do you mean, Mr. Kash Patel? Says ICE arresting people at the biggest Somali Mall in Minnesota. I voted for this. We got 3 minutes of ICE arrests, I guess. I voted for this! Get them out! Baja Cat, thank you. Remember when fraud was done by professionals who knew how to cover it up instead of the current day morons who get caught and then get their embarrassingly sad cover-up attempts exposed in like a day? I mean, they've been able to do it for years, unfortunately. Why is there so much honking? Let's up those numbers. We need to up those numbers. Get Ludwig on scene to encourage them to up the numbers.
He was in there last night. That's who he was talking to. They friends again.
He won't get arrested by ICE in Somalia, just saying.
والله بلا كيرنا كان هذا صيغ واي غارغا سيرك ايغا وتكيب ليه نال مو خيرنا ايدي سفيره نال كجدو افكار ugu xireyni wajiga baawur caadi aan u maleynaa wali waa ku jiraan kan day nal ugu xiran jada dabadii afka
I cannot understand the Star Wars
buriya karmel albaabkaas loo soo xiro baarkinka u xirnaa maleynaa soo xireen
I am very happy to see this happening, dude. Ice going in there and sweeping after Nick Shirley's video. Thumbs up, very great.
Hana waxay dhahaysa booliiska ays nalal meeleeyihiin inaan ku tusaaro maanta ku yiriiska daay waa ku tuskanaa ku
blockade the city.
Musa socdo walaale mujada afkar mujada nalka ugu xiran
pal horse. Your brother and sister-in-law just let you know that they're on their way to adopt a baby. You're going to become an uncle. It's been a long road for them to be able to adopt after they couldn't have their own. Well, that's fucking exciting. Congratulations. Congratulations, Uncle Catman.
Move.
Glub shit over finding commentary.
Bye.
Bye.
I don't
know. It sounds like maybe she's happy the deportations are happening. I have no idea. I have no idea. I choose to believe she's happy for the deportations.
You've been a bad girl.
behind police كناقواس سوق دن كاميرا هذا لسوق كلا بحانا إلا هداينا ميلان لدومنا
Probably an enemy tribe, so she's happy they're getting deported. I forgot about the tribal warfare. Fuck!
I
need a board up? What is a board up? Maybe the woman's like, I've never liked that neighbor anyways. True and real. In response to mass-scale Somali fraud stealing billions from American taxpayers in his state, his response is to say the majority of crime is committed by white men.
Look, it's not law-abiding citizens. If that were the case, there's a lot of white men should be holding a lot of white men accountable for the crimes that they have committed. I think for the community to maybe educate their population, because I think what you're seeing here is there's secondary victims in this, that there's providers inside.
The fraudsters are secondary victims, by the way. Like, it's no wonder that so many people are so smug about the level of fraud they're able to accomplish when there's people like Tim Walz willing to run this kind of defense for them.
The community that are then victimizing the community themselves by signing them up, because when we're going to some of these people, they're like, I had no idea I was in this program. So I think it's asking us then, you know, for every crime, which of course the majority being committed by white men, asking us to do more about that. I think it's crime in general. And I think the biggest thing on this is just making sure that we're educating the population. And again, this is 80 people or so that have been convicted in this, maybe some more in that.
Once again, doesn't matter because judges have been overturning those convictions and setting those people free. Until we get rid of those judges, ain't nothing gonna happen.
Out of a broader ring, Medicaid fraud will stretch across all racial demographics, all ethnic groups. So I think it's
So we shouldn't look at the billions being committed specifically by this one group because other groups are going to commit it at a much smaller scale, but they still do it.
Really important for us to note, each community's got this in their own midst, but to blame them and say that they should have been responsible for stopping it.
They should have been responsible for stopping it. And you know what? How about after we deport all of the Somalis who committed fraud, we go after all of those other groups committing lesser fraud? Because there shouldn't be any fraud. We can truly be equal and racially blind once we get rid of all of the Somalis, and then we can go hunt down the rest of the people you're talking about. How about that? How about we get rid of all the fraud, Mr. Timmy? I agree with you. Let's go. Let's fucking go.
I think that's a pretty hard reach. I think we continue to educate folks about why they shouldn't commit crimes. You would hope that it's being taught both at home and at schools and in our society. But no, I think this idea that the Somali community's to blame for this because they didn't do more, I think that's how we got into this. And
no, they're to blame not because they didn't do more. They're to blame because they're complicit in the fraud, Mr. Timmy, Mr. Timothy. And so after we prosecute and deport all of those people, we can go after the rest of the fraud, because there shouldn't be any. I want all fraudsters, regardless of race, to be criminally charged and or deported if they are here illegally or if they defrauded the immigrant system to get here.
that's, again, I know we're not going to lose the whole plot here. All this work that's being done, Donald Trump brought this to the attention like this is something brand new. This is not brand new.
You're right, it's not brand new. They've been committing fraud for years, especially because we had that video from 2015, brother. That's 10 years of fraud being committed in your state by one community alone.
And it's been being worked on, but he made it white hot and very dangerous.
Yeah, very, very dangerous for the President of the United States to care about U.S. citizens getting defrauded by immigrants. Wow, that's crazy. Why would he care about something like that? And then he doubles down on being a retard. Tim Walz calls fraud investigation white supremacy.
This is what happens when they target communities for their own benefit. This is what happens when they scapegoat. And this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy.
So it sounds to me, Nick, that Governor Tim Walz is saying that you and others that are out there trying to expose this, you're doing it because you're white supremacists. What is your response to him?
Yeah, Tim wants votes. There are entire apartment complexes where white people have been pushed out of these apartment complexes because Somalians have taken over and they're inside of these towns like Minneapolis where they can go get votes from these people. And if you have
It's insane that he can try and invoke the magic spell of white supremacy to rile people up and get them angry about something that's not even happening, simply because the man that uncovered fraud is a white man. Just because a white YouTuber finds fraud does not a white supremacist that YouTuber make. And investigating the fraud is also not white supremacist. Again, the race of the people committing fraud wouldn't matter. If this was happening with any other race, we would still be calling for criminal repercussions. We would still be calling for deportations if they were immigrants. The judges letting these criminals free after getting fraud convictions are white women, and we want all of them held accountable for their shitty decisions of letting fraudsters free after conviction.
100,000 people that will vote for you because you're going to enable and let this stuff happen, and because you're going to call a white person racist for calling out facts. This is what's going to happen to a state like Minnesota.
There are Somalis calling people incel losers for bothering to investigate the fraud. They'll make up any excuse to get people to shut up and stop asking questions. And I mean, again, why wouldn't they? Calling people white supremacists, calling them racist, calling them Nazi, figuring out any kind of Isterphobe language to use, has been successful in shutting people up for over a decade. So why would they stop using the magic spells that have been allowing them to get away with anything that they want? Thankfully, those magic spells are losing a bit of their power, but unfortunately they're not losing power fast enough, which is why we still keep seeing people use them.
Minnesotans, they say Minnesota nice, but they are very upset, and I fully understand why they're upset, because they don't have a governor who's actually working for them. He's actually working against them.
Nick, your video's been viewed 93 million times. What do you think will be the result of this? Do you think that things will change?
Damn, that there's corn-fed Texas, man. That accent, that's thick as fuck, boy.
Cause of bringing attention to this, or do you think it'll be much the same, swept under the rug and keep moving forward?
Yeah, there better be change. People are demanding it. The investigations have been launched just from that video alone. And so there better be change because, like I said, we work way too hard to be paying taxes. We work way too hard to be not knowing where our money's going. And at the end of the day, the people in the government, they work for us. We don't work for them. And so it's their responsibility to hold these people accountable. And so if there's not something that's happening...
I feel a lot of politicians have forgotten that they're supposed to be public servants. Much like journalists that fancy themselves to be an elite class instead of people who are supposed to be uncovering corruption, a lot of politicians see themselves as a ruling class. They see themselves as the new kings and queens of the era. And instead of public servants, they act like they are royalty and that they cannot be questioned. And it's incredibly infuriating that we have to deal with this pampered princess politician attitude instead of them actually being beholden to their constituents.
And people are going to be very frustrated. And so if President Trump's watching this, it's time to really get down to nitty-gritty and to make a difference in this place of Minnesota that is pretty much like Somaliland right now.
Yeah? So it's treason.
This is what
then.
happens when they
Yeah,
target.
it would be nice to start seeing people get tried for treason once again. That'd be very interesting. Let me get this straight. Somali immigrants get billions in taxpayer dollars for free for fraudulent daycare. In exchange, they fund Democratic candidates with the free money. Democratic politicians like Walz, Omar, etc. ensure fraudulent payments continue. How is this not instant jail? Like, this is electoral fraud on top of Medicare fraud. How is this not front page of every newspaper? And he's got some website screenshots here. It says, like, the date of contribution, the contributor, the amount, Adult Daycare LLC. You got a $300 contribution, a $1,000 contribution. Lucky Childcare Center LLC, $1,000, another $1,000 from Lucky Child. Helping Hand Senior Care, $500. And then it shows Minnesota fraud stuff and how these people aren't reporting anything. And this is quote retweeting Mario Neufeld saying, Minnesota Somali fraud plot deepens, fake childcare centers caught donating to Democrats. Screenshots are blowing up showing Somali-run childcare centers in Minneapolis funneling donations to local Somali politicians right around the time massive fraud scandals hit the fan. We're talking places like Sunshine Childcare Incorporated, Minnesota Best Childcare Center Incorporated, Adult Care LLC, Lucky Child Care Center LLC, dropping $1,000 checks in 2021, mixed in with individual donors. This is tied to the epic Feeding Our Future mess, where prosecutors say over $250 million in federal COVID aid for kids' meals got siphoned off by Somali-linked nonprofits. Recent probes flag up to half of $18 billion in state programs potentially looted, including daycare scams where centers pocket millions with no kids in sight, exposing empty daycares in Minneapolis that scored up to $4 million. Politicians like Ilhan Omar got hit with donations from fraud suspects back in 2022, though she bounced the cash to the food bank. If she got hit with donations from fraud suspects, why would she move the cash around to food banks instead of, like, reporting it? That's a little weird. Trump and Vice President Vance are piling on about Somali fraud rings, turning Minnesota into a scam haven. It's got folks demanding audits and deportations, calling it a kickback loop where taxpayer dollars boomerang to polls pushing more handouts. And then you have the screenshots here. This is the one that other guy had reposted in the quote retweet. And here's another one with Sunshine Childcare and Minnesota Best Childcare. All very interesting. All very interesting to see. She's connected to a food bank that turned out to be fraudulent. She's also the one who signed in the Feeding Our Future stuff. So Omar hella dirty, and I very much would like to see something fucking happen. And someone here, Mike Urban, said there's almost 4,000 daycares in a 20-mile radius around Boston, with 1/4 of that being water. So there's 4,000 daycares in a 20-mile radius, of which 1/4 of that 20-mile radius is just ocean. He continues, Boston area daycare update from 1980 to 2020, there were 2,300 licenses issued. That's roughly 57.5 a year over the course of 40 years. From 2020 to 2025, there were 1,627 licenses issued at roughly 271 a year. This is a 4-time jump over the course of 5 years. And here's where it gets interesting. The fraud I'm tracking isn't going to look like Minnesota, at least not for daycares close to Boston. It won't be one big facility with 25 to 50 kids where someone's gaming the system. Around Boston, it will be much, much smaller, but wider in scale. It will be apartments, home-based operations holding maybe 10 kids max. It'll be much harder to spot because it's distributed across dozens, if not hundreds of locations, instead of concentrated in one obvious place. The key here will be to find related parties operating in clusters under random names. But I'll find it. I might film on this tomorrow and put it all into perspective. That'll be very interesting. The racist mayor is also presiding over scams. I'm shocked. I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked at all. I know you're also not shocked, but I'm not shocked at all. Elon Musk quote retweeting Eric Doherty here. Elon saying, the fraud of your taxpayer money is happening nationwide and is liberally applied to attract illegal and some legal immigrants who will reliably vote Democrat. The more you look, the more you find, and you don't need to be a world-class detective to figure it out. This is brazen daylight robbery. And Eric Doherty's post says, Ohio attorney Mehek Cooke confirms massive fraud in Ohio, another hotbed for Somalis. They run fake home health care and bill $250,000 per year per family when no work is actually being done. She says it also happens in Pennsylvania. And these all have quotes, so I'm assuming it's in the video.
So these individuals tried to report the fraud that was happening in Ohio and then eventually came to me to say that we're watching providers rubber stamp paperwork for home health. So in Ohio, and there's many states like this, Pennsylvania and other states too, where you can go in and you can say my aging parent needs a home health care and I want to provide it. So the state will, as long as a doctor has approved it, continue to pay you. It could be for 10 hours, 12 hours, up to 24 when it's critical care. So you could sit at home without caring for an elderly parent who really doesn't need it, make about $75,000 to $90,000 a year. Now you add two parents, that's $180,000. Now you add your in-laws, $250,000. You continue to add this and you wonder, what are the services being provided? So a lot of providers came and said, fraud is occurring because we said we weren't going to rubber stamp this paperwork, so they went to other providers. Their home healthcare network saying, we'll make it worth your while. Well, sounds like a kickback to me. So we really need to investigate the Medicaid system and how much it's increased since the Somalian population came and who really needs critical care, because that's meant for our disabled, our elderly, and people who really need it. Not to just live off our system, and that's what's happening in Ohio. I think it's ridiculous, I think it's despicable, but authorities are now looking at it from the Attorney General's office to the U.S. Attorney's office. I flagged them all because this is Ohio tax dollars and we have to take it seriously. I'm tired of people telling me, well, this is the way it's always been, it's subjective and we can't really check. No, you can. Audit America, audit Ohio now, and I'm pushing for that in every single state.
And I agree with her. I think the this is the way it's always been mentality is the way things get worse. I do not know how you would audit absolutely everything. I have absolutely no idea how you would do that because it seems like such a massive scale auditing that needs to take place everywhere. And it seems like everything in the government is meant to be just as inefficient and slow as possible. So I have no idea how you would do something like that, but I would like to see it happen.